Hey, welcome, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions. It is Thursday, March 20th. It's afternoon meeting, about 3:15. We are back on the Capitol bill. We're working on draft 2.1. And we're going to be going through with our legal counsel as well as our JFO folks for what's really unresolved out there, particularly in terms of language. And I think the best place to start is to have John go just list what items he has that we need to finish work on and give him some clarity and direction.
Okay, John Gray, Office of Legislative Counsel. I may end up needing a Zoom link, Phil, but not sure yet. I will quickly scan through the 3.1 that I'm currently putting together, but is not up on the screen just for my own purposes. I've updated aggregate totals in section 1 to reflect the changes thus far, those latest made. In speaking with Scott, I've added a new line item to section 2 for statewide major maintenance that was pulling over the 7,138,000 that from cash to free up cash.
So are you going to get to the points that are just kind of hang in there that you need some direction? Because I don't know if we want to go through all your changes yet.
Yes, I don't have to read them out. The reason I'm doing it is because I don't know yet where all of the
all right.
changes are. But
I get it.
I can jump past the numbers then.
Oh, that's fine.
And let's see.
I want to have the committee more confused.
Sure.
They already are.
I think so. The first question was, I think that we resolved Randall Meadows' approach this morning. So I think we're all clear there. Just it's going to be a transfer, subdivided, three conditions met, that there's an agreement to deal with the leaseholder, that there's an agreement to account for stormwater management, and that any required permits are input. So I think we've covered the Randall Meadows piece. I think cash is our probably big question.
And what about the cash?
Yeah, how we're thinking about both the sections to which reallocations would go, and then I think you guys had the broader question about the 200K for the stack area, which maybe we have resolved and I don't realize it.
We'll get to that. I just want to list what is unresolved out there, or some resolution, no language yet.
Did we finalize the veterans home?
That's part of it.
I think part of it.
Yes.
That's part of it.
I'd understood that we came to a place on that, but maybe,
The committee doesn't know it. So I just,
yes.
yeah, there were three of us working on this because it got real complicated yesterday afternoon, and said, let's Mary and Troy and I sit down with John and try to figure out this reallocation and bonded and cash and where it sits in language. And we figured something out, but let's continue on what's dangling out.
We have the question about the X-ray machine, I think, which came up today.
Yeah.
Whether that is being adequately dealt with elsewhere, and it sounds like there's concerns about veto. Yeah.
I'll bring the committee up to speed on that one.
Yeah, just you to me.
It's been going around since January. Trust me.
Well, I know the issue. I just didn't know there was a development.
There isn't.
Oh.
I just want
So,
that.
I think I missed part of the discussion this morning, and I think I know where the group is, but within the cash discussion, how to approach 3Bs, including the grant program language here, just how to think about that, if we need to have specific transfer language to account for any of this. Any instance in which we're talking about cash and we start talking about the other sub-account, how to think about that is, I think, one of the questions.
And while we think about the sub-account or the cash thing.
Cash encumbrance, yeah.
Cash encumbrance.
Sorry, I thought that's what you were about to say.
No, it's when does the clock start ticking?
Yes, so I think I do have an answer to that, but if we think it's insufficiently clear, so the way that
It's not clear.
the language is, we're talking 32 VSA section 1001B.
Let's wait till we get there.
Okay.
I just want to do.
Yeah.
The parts
What the things
that need to be resolved, because it's going to be too confusing to the committee. So that the clock, when does the clock start ticking on the 2-year reallocation thing on the cash fund. Remember Nick brought that up this morning, folks? And what,
That's largely the extent of what I have. I think the funny thing that's been happening for me is I've been hearing discussions and then I find that the language already says what is resolved. So it's not always clear to me when something is a open item, I think. Like, I think there's been tentative suggestions as to solutions, but not like full head nodding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not to sleep, but in agreement.
so is that it? Is that what you've got?
FEMA checking?
Yeah, I
In terms of the Waterbury? Oh,
just broadly the
FEMA,
capital
yeah.
complex. We did receive the email from Wanda Manil. I don't have to talk about these if you just want to check them.
Yeah, it's the FEMA, what happens with the Capitol complex during the summer when we're home. And it's setting up a process. Yeah. Over the summer and fall.
Could I make a pitch on that language? I'd just really like to make a case for having a line just saying that BGS is gonna keep the city of Montpelier and the flood commission in the loop. We're talking about adjacent properties here. And we saw what happens in Waterbury if the sides aren't talking to each other. So I'd like to just make sure there, nothing to mandate there, but you know.
Keep that in mind.
Okay.
Get there. Anything else that's dangling out there?
Notwithstanding.
Oh, yeah. Notwithstanding. Anything else? We've got Randall, we've got a lot with the cash fund. In terms of, do you do it by sections to reallocate? Do you do it in the cash fund? We've got a couple projects out there that we're changing direction. On the cash, one is 1.5 million with the vets home. It's going from B and C wing to A wing, and then we got 200,000 from the stack area over at the Supreme Court that BGS didn't need. The X-ray machine, it's easy.
You got the 3 Bs.
The 3 Bs, cash moving to sub-account 2, how that whole process works. Got to look at the grant language. And then with the cash fund, in terms of when do you do the reallocations, the administration needs clarity in terms of when the clock starts ticking. And then the Capitol complex, if there's any FEMA decisions over the summer, what's the process for the legislature to act? And also to keep Montpelier in the loop. And then notwithstanding language with reallocation in but department or agencies have the money longer than 5 years and we're allowing them to keep it, then we need notwithstanding language, the statute. Do you have any language at all to the Randall Meadow?
I do.
Why don't we start with that one? That one I think will be pretty easy. Can you put that up on the screen at all?
Yeah, if I could get you may have already sent the Zoom link. Okay.
Yeah, you have the link.
Let's put in a time here.
Start with something easy. Has this language been sent to BGS?
They basically provided this and then I slightly tweaked it. So they're on board with this approach.
Did they also send it to the Waterbury town manager?
That I don't know. Wanda handed me a physical copy of the language when I was, or Cole handed me the physical copy of the language in the room. So it's not something that came up after Tom left, is my point. They had the information when they walked into the room.
I know, but they haven't seen the language. Waterbury hasn't seen the language.
Unless she gave him a copy.
Scott, could you connect with Wanda and just see if that proposed language has been sent to Waterbury, the town manager? So they're working. I don't want to get blindsided.
Or else they could be sent to the cafeteria again.
You don't do that twice.
There are worse places.
This is true.
Okay, so this is gonna look kind of funny just because this is a document that I'm currently editing, so you're gonna see marks and strange formatting. But this is the new section that deals with the Randall Meadow property. So notwithstanding 29 VSA 166B, that is the statute that calls out that if BGS is selling property, it needs to do a bid or take an agent to do this and needs to ensure that they receive at least fair market value. Because you're proposing a transfer here, you need to notwithstand that particular language. Commissioner is authorized to subdivide and transfer to the town of Waterbury the portion of the land, parcel number identified, that is commonly referred to as the Randall Meadow. Once any permits required for transfer have been obtained, and the commissioner and the town of Waterbury have formed an agreement to.
So who needs to obtain those once any permits required for transfer have been obtained? So that would be BGS who would be going after that, or the town?
I don't know. I don't know. But I will just say this was the BGS proposal. That's that.
I'd like to know.
I thought Joe was saying he was on the permits, right?
Yeah, I would assume it's BGS, but if somebody asks us, we need to know.
Yeah.
So there are three conditions. The permits required for transfer have to be obtained. And then the commissioner and the town of Waterbury have formed an agreement to the subdivision of the parcel to reflect stormwater management needs to the satisfaction of the commissioner. I will say the language I received from BGS was just about the subdivision of the parcel reflects stormwater management needs. I added the language to the satisfaction of the commissioner because to reflect stormwater management needs is that it could be fine, but conceivably you could meet that condition without it being sufficient, satisfactory, basically. Other condition, a plan to align the transfer with the current lease for the parcel. So ensuring that upon transfer, that lease isn't disrupted.
So for number one, the subdivision of the parcel to reflect stormwater management needs to the satisfaction of the commissioner and a plan to align the transfer of the current lease. So would number one involve, like I remember Joe saying they may need to do a survey because they really don't know where the boundaries of the property are. Did other folks hear that?
Well, that makes sense because we've been shown maps of two different pieces of acreage. First time we saw it was 45 and change, and then most recently it's 47 and change.
I would think that should be a common practice, that if we're giving a piece of property,
They're gonna do
there's a
it.
survey to make sure we're doing the right thing. That's just my humble.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to put language to that effect or not. Like Joe brought that up.
So this particular language I think of as being about that orange overlay, unless I just jump too late into the conversation.
It is to a certain extent, but they don't know where the boundaries are.
For sure. I think that's implicit in, but to do this, you would need to.
Yeah, Wanda specific said they didn't want to write how many acres there were
Right.
because they don't. It was an
Right,
estimate,
that's why it's a parcel number.
right?
But that's why I heard it the other way around. It wasn't the entire, it's only the green part of the orange, so we need to survey it to know where that line is that we're keeping versus what we're transferring is what I was hearing.
That's what I understood, and that's why I thought the acreage was slightly different.
Yes.
They don't want the whole thing, they just want.
Right,
They
they
The
want-
need.
green is bigger than the orange, which we were transferring.
I agree.
So should we put in some language that refers to a survey needs to be complete? I'm trying, it seems like I remember Joe saying that they would have to do a survey.
What I don't know is if that's part of permitting anyway, right? I mean, to me, that feels like BGS could answer that better than we can.
I think the point I was trying to make is that this forming an agreement to the subdivision of the parcel to reflect the stormwater management needs would seem to implicitly require that. How could you subdivide in the absence of having the limits?
You can't subdivide without a survey. It's
Yeah,
possible.
But I don't, yeah.
I would probably put it still in language. So that they know that is part of it. Is there any harm in that?
There's no harm in doing it. Yeah.
Because I think, we may not all be here whenever. So is there going to be that knowledge of what's supposed to be done?
The subdivision of the parcel to reflect stormwater management needs is to protect the complex. That's the
Yes.
intent of it,
Yes.
is to protect the complex.
Yeah, and that's why it says to the satisfaction of the commissioner
Right.
and not to the town of Waterbury. This is
Right.
about ensuring that the stormwater
So-
practices are,
It's the stormwater practices and how that area is gonna be reconfigured. Is there only two or is there three things there for the agreement? We're only seeing two.
there's only two for the agreement, but there's a third condition, which is the clause preceding this. Once, when we hit the once word, this is what's triggering the condition. So authority to subdivide and transfer once any permits required for transfer have been obtained and then form an agreement too. You could also include the permits piece as one of the agreement, but I just assumed you don't have to place things in agreement. What you're trying to ensure is that the permits are actually obtained. So it depends on the approach you want to take. You could just have conditions that say, obtain the permits, subdivide the parcel to reflect stormwater management, have a plan in place to align the transfer. It doesn't have to be part of an agreement. It's like, those are three independent conditions you have to meet rather than forming an agreement to the subdivision, if that makes sense. So different approaches you could take to check this. It may be simpler to meet the condition of an agreement. Like these guys have formed an agreement to subdivide along these lines and create a plan.
Here,
Is it appropriate to put it anywhere that the reason, because I could kind of see it, we were kind of flailing a bit this morning until we said this will protect our property up there. I think some little tiny clause referencing that wherever it's appropriate would be good, because I think that's what gets people's arms around, oh, we're really doing this for a good reason. Protect our property, but also to help Waterbury and with the stormwater and all of that. So I'm thinking just something short.
You just think after to reflect the Waterbury complex's stormwater management needs to the satisfaction.
Something like that.
Oh, you just want to specify that, yeah,
Because everyone was totally on board the second that was said. So I think our colleagues would also probably, if they read it, would get it as well. We're doing it for not only ourselves, but for Waterbury as well. But there's a reason, because in the future, people aren't going to have Alice's history of knowing all of this.
So, yeah, I like this suggestion that you could add, so it'd say the subdivision of the parcel to reflect stormwater management needs of the Waterbury State Office complex
Right.
to the satisfaction of the commissioner.
that's
what
what
I
it
said.
says.
Yep, nice and, yeah.
Yeah, very simple.
And look at this, we can see it happening live.
Oh, my gosh. Do you need a drum roll?
It's too late, I've already finished.
Did it. So,
Oh, no. We've jumped.
You've tried.
do we want to be silent on the survey? And just kind of assume it's gonna get done? You know what assume is?
I don't like assumptions.
I don't think it makes any difference. I think it's redundant, but it doesn't hurt me.
You could say authorize the survey and subdivide.
Yeah.
Authorized to
Yes.
satisfy.
Yeah.
the trans-
Well, actually, that's a really good point because that makes me think about the once usage. Yes, so what I can do is authorize to survey and subdivide and transfer to the town this parcel, and then I'm going to change the once just to say, provided the following conditions are met. Because you could see a timing problem here, basically, that you can't survey until you've met the condition of subdividing, and I don't want to create a conflict, basically. So I'm not going to do that live, but
Okay.
I will note that.
I think that's good too, because it sets Waterbury up for success, because then they're gonna have to take on the real expense of getting engineers in there.
Yeah.
That are gonna have to, you're gonna have to pay them a lot to lay that whole thing out and how they're going to go about it. The survey is that step that then the engineers take and can work from really clearly. So I think it's the right thing to do for the time, for them.
So when would the transfer occur?
So the change that would basically happen is this would be provided that the transfer shall occur after the following conditions are met. Permits required have been obtained. Subdivision of the parcel to reflect stormwater management needs of the Waterbury State Office complex to the satisfaction of the commissioner. And a plan is in place to align the transfer of the current lease for the parcel. And in that case, you'd have the independent conditions. There's not an agreement to do those things. It's those have to be met. You have to subdivide it, you have to obtain the permits, and you have to have in place a plan to align that transfer with the current lease for the parcel. Only once you've met those three conditions can you then transfer. Prior to that, you would survey and subdivide. Does that,
So that paragraph will be reconfigured. No different.
yeah, slightly.
Yep.
I did hear from Cole and Commissioner Manoli that they had shared the language prior to these changes with Waterbury last night, and Tom was in favor of it.
Good.
Well, now they're gonna get new language.
Yeah.
this is very, I mean, this is the same substance as what they had.
I want them to see it. I don't add language that is different than what anyone has given me until we send it back to them and they see it. I cover my bases because I've seen people in this building blindsided.
So say, I don't think I've seen a committee that does that yet. So that.
I know you don't, because they
So
don't.
in my general experience is that everyone is blindsided and that's the.
Be one of them. I'm not gonna be one of them. I didn't learn that way.
You hit the nail right on the head.
I learned to follow, let people know if you're changing some language, it impacts them, let them know.
The only efficient way to do business.
Is Randall spelled right there with Randall? Yeah, I guess it is.
Jesus.
Wells, yeah, it's just doesn't.
Honest.
So when we get the new language, we should make a point tomorrow, maybe when you finish that, whenever you finish it, John. You could send it to Wanda and indicate, please send it to the town manager in Waterbury as well. But this is where we landed,
Okay.
okay? And then when we go through this tomorrow, we'll have to have BGS and, well, obviously. Okay, I just want to do some of the easy stuff first.
Local publication, Waterbury Roundabout. Spells Randall with two L's.
Okay, it just doesn't look right, but it is. Let's do the X-ray thing. Do you have that language?
I can find it in my inbox probably because it's quite old, unless I can pull up the, do you know that in current year, what the H, you know what?
Section 27, I wrote it in the email.
Let me find
Is it 27 or 87? It's gonna be 27, isn't it?
this bill.
No, it's in
No.
the BAA.
Oh.
It's in the BAA.
Found it.
Um,
H 489, section 87.
87. Yeah, it's 87. What it is, there was 100,000 last year in the capital bill that we put in for the Sergeant at Arms to purchase furniture. And right, and they purchased chairs. We
Yeah.
needed new chairs in the cafeteria, and there's still money left over from the 100,000. So Agatha's asked me way back in January, can we use the remaining balance
489.
for the X-ray machine for security that they bought here in the State House? They've already bought it, so this would be backfilling their budget. And I said, yeah, I don't see a problem with that. We can do that in a capital bill. Well, lo and behold, it ended up in the BAA appropriations, which is really not the appropriate place because they are amending our capital bill of last year. So in going through the BAA today, sitting on the floor, going through the bill, I said, this thing is still in there. So my fear is if it's gonna be vetoed, this is gonna get lost.
I was like, gotcha, I'm with you now, I just caught up.
So if this BAA gets vetoed, which is what people are anticipating, this can get lost real quick. So I would like to have this language in our capital bill as backup, and all it does, this amends our capital bill of last year, so it needs to be in our capital bill, not appropriations
purchasing.
BAA.
Yes, absolutely.
So I want this as backup in our bill in case this all gets lost. So what this language does, there's 100,000 that we appropriated in last year's capital bill that is being amended, that 100,000 would be used for the replacement of the cafeteria furnishings and the purchase and installation of the State House X-ray machine.
This is not at all dissimilar to what we're doing with that 1.5 million.
Yes.
Right,
Exactly.
Yes,
right.
I don't know if you want to frame it the same way.
Could be. Yeah, it's the same way. And that's a good segue to what we're doing. So I'd like to have this added to that. to our capital bill as back.
Absolutely.
Good.
I don't want to lose it. It's been something I was asked way back the first week of the session. So, yeah, I don't have a problem with it.
May I ask a question of kind of like institution, common practices that you guys have? So we're talking about going back, amending scope of project, expanding a project in prior capital years. The way that I had thought about this is that obviously within a biennium, that's the traditional, the whole second act that you pass is an adjustment act that does exactly that. So that makes sense. But that with between capital bills, there's different approaches taken. And the reason that this is distinctive is that we're talking about not within a biennium. We're talking about going back to, okay, I just want to
Well,
make,
and it's the point you made.
yes, the reallocation.
Earlier, that
Veterans.
Functionally, a
Yeah.
reallocation
Right.
could be an expansion of project purposes within a line item, like, you know.
So I was just stunned when I first saw this in the first BAA. And I brought it to everyone's attention. I said, this is inappropriate. I mean, yeah, you can do it. Nothing's going to stop you. But it's really a capital bill because you're amending our capital and you haven't talked to us. So I'd like to have that put in our bill. And then if BAA is not vetoed and it goes through, then we'll pull it from our capital bill because you don't want it in two places. What I want it there is backup.
when will we know?
How many of those $100,000 are remaining?
I forgot. Do you know, Scott?
Yeah, again, Scott Moore, Joint Fiscal Office, I believe they had spent around 50,
Yeah, it's about a half.
53, so between 45 and 55. I can look it up if you're interested.
It's close enough.
That's about what they had spent.
They've already purchased the X-ray machine through the Sergeant at Arms budget, but this is to back that up. Make her budget whole for this, because they already purchased. Back, I don't know when they purchased, it was before this session. But they weren't, wasn't part of this appropriation.
So this maneuver has absolutely nothing to do with our current,
Seriously, that's what we have.
it doesn't change the bottom line.
That's
Because it's the same.
Sorry, no.
See the.
So add this.
Add this, so this is a good segue. Are people clear with it?
Yeah.
It gets confusing.
Just asking about repro, the balance of 100,000 of
Oh,
choices, yeah.
well, I mean, technically, we're repoing that 100,000,
But it's done a different way.
yeah, and then we're gonna reuse it in the same place.
Right.
The reallocations, yeah, it gets,
It's fine, that, this methodology seems a little translucent, but I'm fine with it.
trust. Gotta have trust.
If I didn't, you would know.
I would. Any doubt on that one?
We're not afraid of it.
So let's go, segue to Troy, Mary and I sat down with John over lunchtime and really talked, there's a lot of moving pieces here between bonded dollars and cash dollars. And in the reallocations, we've done a lot of the reallocations with bonded dollars, and that is really, really clear. When you reallocate any bonded dollars, it's pretty clear it goes back to the bottom line of the capital bill. Okay, it stays in that structure. Sometimes we have done where we reallocate money and then we target that money sometimes to a specific project that we're funding in the capital bill. And we do that for a variety of reasons. It could be to track it. It could be we want to highlight it to our colleagues that something is going to be funded that people may have requested. And we found money in the reallocations to do it, but we wanted an item to be listed so that our colleagues could see, yes, it's funded. We are now entering the world of cash that has been there for a couple of years in our allocation of subaccount A of the cash fund. And there's two items that we have really found. One was the vet's home and their testimony that came through us last week. We put in 1.5 million of cash in FY 25. I think it was FY 25.
Yep.
For B and C wing. in testimony from the vets home, they indicated, we're not gonna go forward with B and C wing, we're gonna go forward with A wing instead. Well, they didn't have any money for A wing, so we said in this committee, take that 1.5 million of cash that we have in our spreadsheet in language in last year's capital bill that would go to B and C wing, that we reallocate that. And that 1.5 would go back to the vets home for them to do design. We'll have to find out, is it design work and construction? I don't know if they're gonna do construction. That 1.5.
The American wing.
Right. For A wing. So that is one piece. The other piece that there's cash is there was work to be done in the stack area down in the pavilion. And we, as we were going through all the lists of projects for cash, we asked Joe last week, there's 200,000 there. How far along are you doing this? Are you going to do it? He said there's been a whole change in direction. Some of that's from because of the flooding. They're still working with the Supreme Court to figure out what to do with this space. He said, we're not going to be using it. So we said, let's take it back. That one has no direct nexus to a particular project in the capital bill. So that goes back to the bottom line. So we got two cash items that we are changing. And that needs to be reflective somehow in the language. And that's what we worked with John. So it's all yours.
It is the way that it works in the draft.
So what we ended up doing, the 1.5 million is going to be reallocated. And then Scott is going to put in the spreadsheet a line item in the vets home for A wing, and then we need to find out, I think it's just planning design. I don't know if they're going to get into construction. Maybe a call to Melissa Jackson, somebody to find out more specific. And then the 200,000 is going to be reallocated to the cash fund.
I think that's currently the way we have it written is it's authorized to defray expenditures in this act. But this was the broader discussion. If it's cash for cash, reallocations of cash go to the cash section, reallocations of bonds go to the bonded section. I keep pitching that as an idea, which makes it seem like I have a position on this. You guys can do whatever you want. That's what intuitively makes sense to me, but you can take different approaches to this to spell out why that seems intuitive to me. You could defray expenditures within the bonded section with cash, in which case you're then authorizing bonds that don't go to bonded projects, they go to cash. So I think it's cleaner to have it where cash reallocations go to section 19 where the cash is.
I would keep them separate.
Right. Yeah, you said that yesterday too.
It's once you intermingle them, if you think we don't understand it now, we'll never understand.
So for that 1.5 for vets home, that would also be in what you're calling section 19, which is the cash.
So
But it would specifically say to the vets home.
yes, that's, and I can show you. Just a second.
You need a drum.
I'm trying to beat the drum roll each time if I can. Okay. This is draft 2.1, so not the Word doc I was showing you earlier, but what has been previously publicly shared and walked through. We're in section 19, very bottom of page 20.
Section 19 is.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is section 17. This is the reallocations. I'm sorry, let me jump down.
Reallocation. Okay.
Yeah, just a second. Can't see my.
Yeah.
There we go. Yes, so just to jump up to the lead in for this, authorizations, fiscal year 26 spending authority for the following capital projects from the capital infrastructure subaccount are authorized as follows. And your last item here, 1.5 million to the Veterans Home for the design of the American unit. And then the money that, at least accounting wise, you guys were backing this with was the reallocation section that we were just in, that subsection H, which reallocated from the Brandon and Cardinal units, the 1.5 million for expenditures within section 19, which is where this falls.
So that's where the 1.5. Now bring us back to where the 200,000.
Yes, the reallocation of the stack.
Yeah.
So that's this right here, of the amounts appropriated from the capital infrastructure sub-account. And authorized in Act 69, that was your 2023 capital bill, 200,000 is reallocated to defray expenditures authorized in this act. So this is what I was calling out in this act versus authorized in section 19. You say in this act, you could defray expenditures anywhere, including bonded dollars. Section 19 specification is your cash reallocation goes to the cash section.
So the 200,000, even though it's cash, we're not delineating that to be reallocated within the cash fund. We're putting it to the bottom line of the capital fund.
On the spreadsheet, that's the way it effectively works, is I currently have two line items, if you will, one for 1.5, one for 200. The 200 just dropped to the bottom, and then the other 1.5 is then reallocated from B to C to A. So you will see effectively 3 lines on the spreadsheet.
Is that in our last spreadsheet?
No, I haven't put it in yet. But right now, that 200 just dropped to the bottom.
And it doesn't look like cash.
It looks like cash, yeah. You'll see it on the,
Okay.
On your new spreadsheet.
you'll see on the new
Right,
spreadsheet,
okay.
you'll see the 200,000 in there. It affects the bottom line of the cash inside.
That's not what this language really says for the 200, right? Did you want
Well,
it?
that is what this does effectively. This is to defer, I mean, I can specify, it sounds like there's agreement now authorized in section 19 to replace authorized in this act to go to authorized in section 19. And this goes to projects within the section 19, which is the way that you guys have balanced it out, right? Is you've accounted for that funding, the 200K in the decisions you've made to send off 7 million, whatever it might be, and then to pay for particular projects. So some of this stuff is, like all this stuff is fungible. It's really about tracking. It's a lot of like this.
And what's going through my mind is what the administration has asked for. Do you remember even this morning? That they want this committee to be totally in control of the cash and totally in control of the reallocations. We have said, well, we got to let this play out over the next few years to really see how it does play out. And ironically, this year, we have ended up reallocating 1.7 million of cash. So I see this conversation between the 1.5 and the 200,000 as kind of laying out that first thought process in terms of how we're going to deal with cash in the cash fund going forward in the reallocation world in our projects, that sometimes the project isn't going to go forward and there's cash there, or that we want to redirect that cash to another project. So this kind of lays out, it's the beginning of that conversation. How do we do, what do we do long term? So that's what I'm thinking in terms of, do we specify on line 9, authorized in section 19? To keep that 200,000 in the cash section.
Orient the committee back to the spreadsheet a little bit. Column C is basically is section 19.
The cash.
Cash. So when we look at putting in a cash item, I can put that cash item in section 6 for the veterans home, whatever, but as long as the dollars are in the column C, it is section 19.
Right, so where would the 200,000 go? Because that's not being,
Right now, I happen to have it in section 17 as a reallocation. On the spreadsheet, it is in the grouping of section 17, but it's in column C, so effectively it's section 19. Confusing, I know. but-
no.
Just like the 1.5 is in
Correct.
section 17.
So what would the committee think of line 9, authorized in section 19? Instead of in this act.
I'm taking John's advice. I think I'd do that.
And Scott, I'm sure you're right, but I see it in column H.
My apologies, it is column C and column H. Column C is the gov rec and column H is the house record.
Right.
Okay, but it's actually affected on there twice, so I apologize. So
No.
Yeah. in my head, I have cash as C because iterative, but you're right.
Want to make sure I'm on the same wavelength.
Yep.
So where are we as a committee? Committee makes the decision.
Whatever you say, boss.
No, committee makes the decision. You guys are falling back on me too much.
Let me just track this though. So
Yeah.
we're changing it to expenses authorized in section 19, knowing that section 19 goes wherever we want it. It goes into the, I mean, it's still bottom line.
Bottom line, but it is cash.
And it's going back to going back to the subcount that we then moved around a little bit.
Right. And we don't know where the 200,000
Right,
went.
it's just
It's just
part of
there, it's
the
part of the big picture.
111 million or whatever.
So that does make sense what John did propose.
Representative Trout, you are absolutely correct. With the one caveat, the 111 is bond.
And then, yeah,
126.
126,
Yeah.
yeah. That's
Just
what I
to
meant.
clarify that.
That's 111.
111 is just bonded.
Which will be our section 1.
10 million
First page.
cash.
You got me confused. What? The 111?
I just threw a number out before
Slightly,
being.
slightly wrong. So we can pretend I didn't say anything. Everything's fine.
Say it. Say, oh, phew, you threw in 111.
Yeah, don't, yeah.
So where are we on line 9 for that 200,000? Is it reallocated to defray expenses authorized by this act, which is the whole kit and caboodle? Or defray expenditures authorized in section 19, which lists all of our projects that are paid for with cash? If you say authorized in section 19, it means those dollars are going to offset those projects that are listed in section 19, which are the projects we have allocated cash to.
Well, then that seems reasonable.
I'm waiting for other members to weigh in.
Yeah, I like it.
I like
I
it.
think it's pretty right on.
In the next version of the spreadsheet, I've included the same section numbers we have to go rec, but for this bill, so we can really clearly see where it is.
So, John, I think we're saying
Cool.
in section 19.
And I will then ask the inverse or converse question for the bonded reallocations. Would you like to specify 2 through 16, the bonded sections, which is, I think, implied by what you just
Yes.
said? Okay.
I don't know that, you'll see it better when you see the language for folks. He's referring to the sections in the bill, the language in the bill.
Yes,
not the spreadsheet.
I'm sorry, and I should
Language in the bill.
say that too. Anytime I am talking about language in the bill, which is what I know. I don't know the spreadsheet. I just know the language.
We're working with both. So while we're in the reallocations, Troy wants to make sure that by statute, we haven't been doing, by statute for reallocation is, after 2 years, the money is 2 years old. The repro committee looks at all of the money that is older than 2 years. And they make a decision in reaching out to the departments and agencies where, like there's 100,000 here, 500,000, where are you? Is it encumbered? You planning to use it? And then when they get the information, some of it's really clear that that money's encumbered, even though it's older than 2 years. Some of it may be in beginning forms of planning isn't quite encumbered. The committee makes a judgment call of keeping the money or pulling it back. And in some situations, it's real clear. We pull it back. Also by statute, which we didn't realize until January, was if money is older than 5 years, it automatically, and it's unencumbered, it automatically comes back. So this year, the repro group did look at those dollars that were older than 5 years. And there were situations that they did bring the money back. And there were situations they kept the money there to be used. In those situations, what I'm understanding, you folks, where you did not claw the money back, you need a notwithstanding to allow those departments or agencies to hang on to that money that's older than 5 years old.
I did not realize that was the request. That makes complete sense to me. So I thought it was the end, that's what I was trying to explain is if you're reallocating, then you're just doing what the law says, but so I don't know what days
Okay.
refrain from.
I'll put those
reallocation.
together for you.
Okay,
Do you want to do that in person or do you want an email?
Do it.
whatever works for you. I mean, I can,
Is it quick or is it pretty involved?
There are, I think, 4 or 5
I was
instances.
gonna say they
Why
were.
don't you work together
Okay.
on this? For that. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
yes, and yeah, I misunderstood. Okay, that makes sense to me.
So we don't want to lose that. Okay, what else have we got here?
And just for folks' orientation, the reallocations we're talking about, old ones, are ones like you see here at the bottom of page 19, 2017. I think we have a 2015 somewhere else, so.
Yeah. And then there's some that.
2015 was at 58,000. That was
Yep.
specifically then sent to. You got
That's
it.
boosting the
Yeah.
two.
Print.
Yep. Just like print and postal.
Howard story.
Okay, now.
Come on, let's do a hard one now.
We are, but we've got one that's connected to reallocations. Cash fund. When does the clock start ticking?
Yes.
That's what Nick Kramer came in here today talking about. I'd like to clarify that. They seem to have a different interpretation. So I wonder, John, if you could bring up that part of the statute.
Yep, right here.
Okay.
And I can read it aloud to you. So we're in the cash fund section is what we're talking about. We're not talking about 701A. We're not talking about the capital bill, but the cash fund.
And it is the sub-account A.
Yes, the capital infrastructure sub-account. So this is the language that we went through months ago and then kind of never resolved, but we stopped it from, or you guys stopped it from being included elsewhere. The proposed amendments to this. So any entity authorized to make expenditures from the capital infrastructure sub-account shall have not more than 2 years from the legislative session in which the act authorizing the expenditure was enacted to encumber the funds. Any remaining unencumbered funds shall remain part of the fund account. What we're talking about here is shall have not more than 2 years from the legislative session in which the act authorizing the expenditures was enacted to encumber the funds. So
You interpret that as when the session recess for the year?
that's exactly the way that I read this, is that you have 2 years from the end of the legislative session in which that act was authorized. So to me, this means you would have till probably June. And I ran this by my office to see when they think the legislative session ends, because there could be a question as to when it ends. And the response I got was that the veto session would be, after the veto session is when you would think of legislative session, and there's Latin language to describe what, yeah. But that's the way that I read this, and I will explain why I read it that way instead of being tied to when the actual act is signed. Because it references the legislative session in which the act was enacted. If you wanted to just say from the act passage, you could more easily call that out. You would just say that. You wouldn't say from the legislative session. So to me, it says you have not more than 2 years from that legislative session. And to me, that makes sense that it would be the end of the session then, because if it wasn't the end of the session, you would be within 2 years of the legislative session. So to me, it's kind of the longest clock possible is the way that I read this language.
And the administration interprets it as whenever you pass the bill. I mean, there was
So-
like April or May.
Yeah,
You know.
and
I think it's got to be in language so they understand it. And so
Mm-hmm.
I said, I think it's got to be somewhere in language what it actually is. So they've got it too. So we're following the same rule.
Right, we've got to clear it up in terms of when does that trigger start? And then I think we also need a conversation of not more than 2 years. Because we're already at the 2-year mark, pretty much. It was FY '24. We're not quite at the 2-year mark, but we will be next year. We've already reallocated some of that. The 1.7 we've already done. But we really need to clarify, when does it start? And how far out does it go? Do we do 3
I
years?
think John's interpretation of what it says was right on the money. But I'm just, how do we put it in our language so that anyone reading it, including the administration, knows when it's.
Yeah, it's,
What's our language in our capital bill reallocation, the 2 and 5 years?
Yes, the way that reads, you don't get no, that's what you got. That's what that says. And I think that's what Nick was scratching for that too. He was here.
Yeah, it stays in the fund. It stays in the cash fund. That's where it says the unspent money stay in the cash fund.
Reallocated to the, no, wait.
this is the capital
This
bill
is
language.
Oh,
Not the
Capital bill.
So all unexpended funds remaining for projects authorized by capital construction acts enacted in a legislative session that was 2 or more years prior. So to me, this is actually the same. The reference to legislative session is what is key here. You don't have to call out the legislative session if you want to talk about the act. You talk about that without the legislative session. So you're talking about a legislative session here. What you have is it's a legislative session that was 2 or more years prior to the current legislative session. So I actually think that this is just as clear or unclear as the cash fund language is what I would say.
They're having a problem with the cash more than they're having a problem with the capital
Now, you
bills.
said you had spoken to your colleagues. What was their sense?
So what I asked them about is, what do you think legislative session means? Because to me, grammatically, it's clear to what is referred, and I can do it step by step if that will make it clear. But I take the point that my finding something clear doesn't mean that others do.
And vice versa.
And that is a hard thing to navigate. So I don't mean that, I mean that like,
Slow it down a little bit.
I'll just say, what I mean is, I had someone say to me about a bill, they said, we're interpreting this language to mean this, and I said, well, it doesn't mean that. And they're like, and they said, well, that's the way people are taking it. And I said, I'm not going to redraft something based on your misunderstanding. Like,
That's right over.
So the end of the legislative session, what I heard you say is after the conclusion of the time for veto.
yep. So that is something.
Just state that.
So that you could say, that is the enhancement I would say, but I don't want to cut off your question if you.
Same, I mean, I would just put the end of the legislative session in there, right?
Exactly. You could do something like that.
And add a couple.
Or you could say after.
Yeah, including the veto
Including the veto
session,
session.
because it could mean the.
Including the veto
session will be-
session.
That defines the end of the session. You
Right.
gotta say it if you're gonna,
Right.
that's our problem. It's
Right.
been saying legislative
Because
session and nobody knows. So
some-
that's
a lot of
what it
times-
is.
A lot of times people will think.
I didn't say nobody.
I think in May, when the gavel comes down, that's. the
Right,
end
and
of the
that's what I was
session. But we
just-
always have like a veto session in case we need it.
And or.
If you, well, no, we always adjourn with a veto session in place.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes you do come back for a veto session, other times you don't. So if you don't, the end of the session was in May, right?
So I like where y'all's collective heads are at in this situation, because
And I
you're
like
focused on the
y'all's.
legislative session end, and I'd understood the confusion to be about whether the relevant thing to look to is the act or the legislative session, but it sounds like folks are in agreement that it's the legislative session, and I can step by step explain why I think that's pretty clearly right, but
Well, the administration's interpreting it differently.
Yeah, 'cause-
You can
Yeah.
go tell them they're wrong.
I mean,
Send you to the woodshed.
I think we really need to clarify. Because the administration, I mean, they've been saying this since January, and they had some language in the appropriations BAA that they were proposing.
so
Straighten this out.
another advantage of doing something like having from the end of, or from the end of conclusion of the veto session, or the legislative session in which the act is, it makes clear that you're referencing the legislative session. If there's a confusion as to whether it's after legislative session, as soon as you start talking about the end of the legislative session, there's no confusion about
Right.
Why don't
which
we,
you're referring. So it would say something like, it would make the sentence longer, which is,
fine,
can be more confusing to people, but shall have not more than 2 years from the end of the legislative session as indicated by, if it's always veto session, we could call out veto session. If
Yes, sir.
there's alternative, then you might just leave it at end of the legislative
so I
session.
think If you don't come back, you always adjourn.
But if there are no vetoes,
But if there's no vetoes and you don't come back in June, then the end of the session was in May when you adjourned.
Instead of June, just.
If you had a veto session and you had to come back in June, then the end of the session would be in June.
so I think just adding, from the end of the legislative session in which the anti-housing is enacted.
So let's do that. Does that work for folks?
Totally. It doesn't get rid of the
There's still the question.
time bomb.
I was gonna say, there's still that, which is,
2 years.
yeah, if the
Yeah,
2
that's
years.
where I
are-
was headed next.
Okay.
So what do we do with that?
Always the naysayer.
Give it 3 years? Give it another
Well,
year?
yeah, do we punt this or do we fix it?
Well, 2 years, he's saying, he's saying, even though we've corrected from the end of the legislative session, I think Nick would say, well, that would be
Well, let's just-
June of 2 years ago.
Feel like we do the bonded things, 2 to 5 years and after 5 years.
Yeah, but what Nick was saying is it puts a freeze on all that spending for those projects.
Well, let's change that though, to be very clear that if after 2 years, the repo, the corrections and institutions is gonna review it. After 5 years, let's
But
do
what
the
if-
exact same language.
But he's interpreting this, that any money that's there from FY 24.
Yeah.
That is not encumbered would stop the project.
Right, so we're gonna change that so you can't interpret it that way anymore.
Right, we've got to put it in.
Right.
So
We're gonna change it to mirror the language that is in place for bonded now.
It's the cleanest.
Yeah,
right,
and then the repo committee every year does cash and bonded.
right.
What I would offer here is that is what the administration's original
I know.
proposal for this section was.
We'll give them their properties.
No, what you're saying is that our committee has the jurisdiction of doing the reallocations.
Right, so we're essentially
So
saying
I
that,
don't, are we there to do that?
That's what you guys are already doing.
what we're essentially saying is once allocated, or once appropriations allocates that money to us. Appropriates that money to us, we're gonna hold on to it until we say you can have it back, which we're doing with $4 million this year. We're giving them cash back.
Just codifying what we're already doing.
We're just saying it's gonna hang out here and then we're gonna make decisions and we're gonna work with appropriate.
So there was other language too that the administration wanted that would make it clear that this committee had total jurisdiction over the cash. And we had some concerns about that as appropriations committee did.
So
I don't recall why they said that. Does anyone recall?
Who approach, the administration?
Yes.
Because they think we appropriate the money. And they want us to have control of the money so the appropriations committee can't put their hands on it and spend it somewhere else. That's really what's going on. They
And
want
that's
us
this
to
cash.
have the
That's
control.
exactly what's going on.
That's exactly what's going on. They want us to have the control of the cash, so our colleagues in approps cannot pull it for other items that the administration doesn't support.
We're not changing the may to a shall, so we can still,
Well, I'm just wondering if we have the authority for the reallocations, does that imply that we have the authority over the cash? That's what I'm wondering, because that was connected. That was connected. And I don't think, appropriations committee came in here, and Jim Harrison, Representative Harrison was representing appropriations committee, and they didn't want to tie things up like that because they just didn't know what was
that was
happening.
more than may shall though, wasn't
It
it?
was both.
Was it?
Yeah, it was both. It was both, because they didn't want to change anything.
Okay, so here's the
Or who has
question.
jurisdiction over what at this point? They didn't want to change any. of it.
Can we get rid of that?
Subsection E.
Yeah, and not get rid of it, but can we clean up that language so that there's not this freeze in June, 2 years out? That's still,
Can we just extend 2 years to 3 years and revisit?
We're gonna have
this
this-
next year?
we're gonna have the same
We're
conversation
gonna have the
next
same
year.
conversation next year, but we'll have another year of playing. It hasn't, the issue is with the cash fund, it's so new that it hasn't had time to play out. And the other issue that's kind of playing into this is so much uncertainty in our budgeting world, appropriations is really, I've never seen them so stressed out because they don't know what's gonna happen on the federal level. And there's so much pressure there to backfill what's gonna happen on the federal level. There's no way we're gonna be able to backfill. But they're looking everywhere that they can to at least keep some of these programs that we get a lot of federal money for. If the federal money isn't there, to try to at least take care of some of that. So that's why I'm, hearing the conversations from our colleagues in approps, I don't want to tie anybody's hands, our hands or their hands. And or maybe we just say 3 years and let it play out next year.
Yeah, it might want a longer discussion than we have time for if we're gonna be voting out tomorrow, I mean, this almost feels like a full bill to discuss, really, how we
But
work
2
this.
years, if the administration is interpreting, even if we clarify that it's the end, it's going to be this June.
Yes.
From what Nick Kramer said to us this morning. Doesn't matter if it's in April or June, they're interpreting that the money in 24 FY20 is freezed,
Yeah.
is no longer available. That's our interpretation. But that's their interpretation. So I'm wondering if we change the 2 years out to 3 years, it gives us one more year of trying to see how things,
I feel like it's kind of a Band-Aid, but I think it might be the best we can do now, like,
I don't know. 3 years from the end of the legislative session.
That's,
Well,
Easy.
because again, next year we wouldn't be creating technically the whole budget. We would have more time to discuss this, in the sensible way, and there may be more history around the cash fund. And, we could go ahead to change it.
See, the other thing, we don't know what cash is going to be available next year because we do a 2-year budget, but appropriations does a 1-year budget.
Well, yeah,
Next year, we don't know what's going to be really available.
you will never know what's available because it's up to 4%. It's not 4%.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's going to be initially what the governor proposes. The governor could propose 1%.
is actually part of why I also think the change from may to shall is not really that meaningful in the context of an up to 4. If you retain an up to 4 and it's a shall, it's like you still don't have to put anything in there.
It's up to the administration in their budget that they put forward.
That was one of the biggest concerns. You'd never know what you were
We
getting.
just don't know, because it depends where everything is in the world of the state budget that the administration is seeing in October, November, and December, and what they put together. And then you get a change of administration and everything could change. But that's a big piece for our capital bill. We do a 2-year budget, but our appropriations world is 1 year. And it depends how our revenues do over the years, over that fiscal year. It depends what pressures are there elsewhere. There's so many factors that play into it that we don't know any of that.
And whatever the debt repayments are in that given year.
The debt service,
Yes.
because in theory, the thinking is because we're bonding less, the debt service is going down, which means maybe get more cash, or you may get more less.
It's my entire argument, but I was not successful. Because appropriations isn't any less encumbered by having this 4% we shall, but
Now,
the corollary to this is this committee will have increasingly less money to work with.
we already have.
But that's gonna keep going.
We already have, since the cash fund has been established. In a way,
Absolutely.
we had less and less bonding capacity. Already have. So where are we in terms of the 2 years? I threw out 3 years, give it another year.
Let's go to 3 years and
End of
really
this,
deal with it in, hopefully the beginning of the next session.
Good folks,
yeah, go end of the legislative session in the 3 years.
I agree with those two.
other folks,
I'm perfectly fine with 3 years.
what's 3 years?
South Burlington?
Yeah, and then just put it toward the top of the agenda next year, maybe.
She's going, he's going.
End of legislative session.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's clear
Got it.
last time, it's fine.
you got it, right, John?
Yes.
Okay, the 3 Bs.
Oh,
Yay. I can't wait.
you said you wanted a hard one.
I think someone may have to talk to someone. about
It's summer.
it.
Oh, Mary, oh no, I think she already blew her.
You got your words in.
So let's go to page 31 for a draft. We haven't really looked at any of this language.
I think it's 29, on which you're talking about the Housing Development Assistance Grant Program.
Our draft, oh,
Yeah, it's
I'm on,
29.
I'm sorry, I'm on draft 1. Yeah.
So we're on what page? I'm sorry.
It was
29.
29, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, section 25. I was on the old one. So we haven't really looked at this language. This is something, if I'm remembering correctly, there was this group of you four. There was Troy, Joe, Connor, and Sean, and you worked a variety of different thoughts. And you had this concept. Troy kind of worked up the broad language and submitted it to John, and John put it in bill form.
Mhm.
Is that where we are here with this language, pretty much?
I made some like tweaks to align with, there was a section in the 2018 capital bill that took a very similar approach to what's done here, but basically this aligns with the language that I had received, using the same criteria that was received and passed the CCD.
What were we dealing with in previous capital bill for this? Do you remember?
I can try to find it. I don't have my nice set of 20 tabs in a.
I was just curious. You don't have to do it. I'm just curious.
I can find that later if you're.
It was in 2018 that we.
2018. I can walk through this. I think we did,
Something to do with water quality.
that sounds feasible, or possible.
So why don't you walk us through this and then we'll go from there.
So fortunately, in this case, we have subsection headings to orient for each little paragraph that we're talking about. So your subsection A here on line 6, creation. There is created the Housing Development Assistance Grant Program to be administered by ACCD to ensure transparency, equity, and accountability in the allocation of capital grants through the capital bill to housing infrastructure projects.
So we're really saying it's capital money.
Yes, so that is a question, is if this is being, where this is going, and you would change this if this is not contemplated to be in the capital bill, obviously, but if you maintain this language in form, you could just swap out that clause. The amount appropriated in section 19, and you're seeing an older draft that has bracketed because you had the alternative section 19s, but it'll be D2. The amount appropriated in section 19 D2, that's the 2 million, shall be used to fund this program. So creates program to be administered by ACCD, specifies that the reason for this is to ensure transparency, equity, and accountability in the allocation of those grants, and then appropriates, makes clear that the amount appropriated, that 2 million, is used to fund the program.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, John, if you create a program in session law.
Yep.
It would just disappear after the session. You wouldn't need to sunset.
So the way that it works is it will exist in
Yeah.
perpetuity. You would want to sunset it. I don't know what you guys' approach on this is, but you could do like a 3-year sunset or something to that effect. If you don't include a sunset, and it was intended to be permanent, then you would put it in the green books. Like if the intent was permanency, you'd codify this. If the intent is temporary, that's why this is in session law. And so here I would propose an end date if that's what you want to make sure it has.
That's where my head's at.
Change your note. How long? Let's just flag that. For you new folks who have come in, we are on page 2 of draft 2.1. Going over the language for the structure of the 3 Bs with the 2 million.
Page 20.
What did I say?
You said page 2.
It's page 29. Means section 25. And it's draft 2.1. That's what I was thinking. The
Yeah.
draft. Can get beyond the 2. Okay.
The folks are good. We just walked through subsection A, which is just creating the program to be administered by ACCD, making clear that the appropriated 2 million in section 19 goes to fund this program. subsection B, the use of funds, you're gonna see this is relatively skimpy, I would say, because you're not trying to fully create, you're just establishing that the program exists and then kind of tasking ACCD to further flesh this out, providing guidance as to what's being done. So use of funds, line 12, capital grants authorized in this section shall be used for housing infrastructure projects that ACCD selects through a competitive grant program using the project criteria developed under this section, and that's your next subsection that will come to.
And if we don't do this out of capital bill, we would want to get rid of that capital. At the
Yeah, you just put grants.
grants authorized.
You don't have any.
Yes, although I think they are capital grants that are.
Sure.
Yeah, but we don't want it connected with a capital bit.
Yes, I think you can do that. I think,
Yeah.
if it's positioned in another bill, it will be clear that it's not part of the.
Yeah, yeah.
Non-capital bill, capital grants.
Exactly.
Easy.
Subsection C, so this is kind of more fulsome, but this is providing that guidance to ACCD as to developing the program. So ACCD shall develop criteria for awarding capital grants through the program that ensure that a competitive application under the program, one, demonstrates clear readiness for immediate implementation of the proposed project, including through evidence of secured permits, the completion of design and planning phases, confirmation of additional funding sources within a realistic timeline, groundbreaking, breaking, and construction. So giving evidence that this is actually ready for immediate implementation, not just, this wouldn't be reliant on a pure assertion that these folks are ready to go. You would need evidence to demonstrate that. But again, we're talking about ACC developing criteria that ensure this condition is met, so they can do that through whatever method they think is appropriate. So that's your first criterion. Second, the application aligns with community and regional planning goals and objectives. 3, provides evidence of local support, including by resolutions of support from local legislative bodies, community input processes, and demonstrated partnerships with local organizations. So again, trying to provide not just assertions that these things exist, but that you actually have things you can point to say, yes, local support is here. 4, demonstrates that the proposed housing infrastructure project will address local housing needs, including by increasing affordability, diversifying housing type, or increasing accessibility to community resources. Permissible ways in which you can say that it addresses local housing needs. And lastly, this is kind of one of the bigger substantive hooks, provides for permanently affordable housing units to ensure long-term affordability within the community.
So all 5 of those need to be in place, correct? Because you have an and on line 9.
Yes, that's right. The ACCD would be developing their project application process for the competitive grant program. And they would need to ensure that each of these, all of the 5 criteria are ensured through their application process. So they could include these outright as criteria they use, or they could develop criteria that capture these. They could develop additional criteria. It's for ACCD to develop the program. This is just you guys saying, make sure these are factors that are part of your grant application process.
For the folks, for new folks, for drafting, when you see a list, 1, 2, 3, 4, A, B, C, D, and you see the word at the end of the next to the last list that says and, that means all of those 1 through 5 have to be in place. If you see the word or, it means 1 or 2 of those need to be in place, not all 5.
The added thing I would throw in for reading the conjunctions, which I take the point, that is a good way to think about it, is when you see and or at the end of the list, you should also look at the language leading into it, because sometimes we'll say meets each of the following, right? It needs to meet all of the following, or meets 3 of 5, something along those lines. So lead in plus conjunction should tell you. And if it's unclear, that is a problem. So it's good to know. It's good to flag that if you see that somewhere.
So this morning, that was the permanently affordable was an issue, as was the grant program. But let me read because I asked the administration this morning, what was the criteria they used to determine these 3 projects? And I think I missed one, but this is what I have written. I don't know if other people wrote anything down or remembered. Housing. It was impact by the flood. Regional economic impact. Project readiness. other funding sources that they have, and community support. That's what was,
That's all I have.
one other item.
That's what I've.
That's all I got.
That's all I-
Yeah. That's the criteria that they use. And I thought that would be good to see how our criteria of 1 to 5 reflect that or not.
So there are many of these that are pretty directly related. Obviously, there's a particular approach to the housing. You have an affordability constraint here, but this would ensure that there is housing, that it actually is a housing infrastructure project. The project readiness is a clear portion of this, right? You want demonstrations, clear readiness for immediate implementation. Alternative funding sources, that's included here as well. Where did we have that? Yes, confirmation of additional funding sources. I will say that's not an independent piece of the immediate implementation piece like it is for their proposal. And then community support is also included here through that provides evidence of local support. The pieces that I would say are not directly addressed among those are flood impact and regional economic impact.
Well, we could put in flooding. And the other ones. Yeah, economic impact. I mean, we could do that. Committee wants, it's up to the committee.
Flooding part, I have a question on. Were these projects supposed to have had flooding within the last year or two within the area where the project was?
It says
I think-
community is impacted by.
Yeah, communities.
We haven't had flooding in our communities at all. In that, especially that area. Very little. The only section I saw was over towards North Bennington a little bit, and that was just coming over to the road. But this wasn't like, I think of, Berry, I think of Montpelier that were just devastated. We had virtually no flooding.
Of the 3 Bs, the only one that really had the flood impact was Barry.
Really, absolutely.
It's the only one.
May I offer a thought here, which is that whether you do or don't include these additional criteria, they can be included through ACCD's development process. What you would do by adding something here is just ensuring that that happens, but they could still use that if that's the approach that they want to take. So you don't have to exhaustively spell out things. What you just want to do is make sure that you hit the points that you care about. I'm also running low on battery if anyone says.
Do you have a charge? Do you have a course?
For you.
No, that's,
I got a phone.
we're almost at the end of this section and I'm not gonna need the screen share, I think, so I may be okay.
You have the sort of connection.
Maybe.
So we all
Yes, it looks like it.
know we need affordable housing intuitively,
Yeah,
but do we have actual
Yep.
data that shows where the housing need is more or less?
it's not our world, unfortunately. I don't know.
I mean, I would think that this would be part of the criteria is to say, where's it needed most to make the biggest impact?
But
That would be
all,
the first thing.
but also, what is affordable housing? Is that workforce
Well, there
housing?
you go.
Is that homeless? Is it, just
The definition
affordable
of
housing? Because
affordable
everyone has a different definition for it.
So number 4, hang on a second. Number 4 says demonstrates that the housing infrastructure project will address local housing needs, including by increasing affordability, diversifying housing type, and increasing accessibility to community resources. That language seems pretty broad. It's number 5 where it says provides for permanently affordable housing units. And the administration had an issue with the term permanently affordable.
It is.
So James and then Troy.
I don't know how we would address this, but I think we generally agreed that we don't want this to be an ongoing thing or we see it as a pressure. So to me, when we're saying you gotta make this grant parameters, that's setting them up to do it more in the future. And I would advocate at least weekly, not probably strongly, but some level, that we remove a lot of this language and figure out a different way to just scoop $2.1 million over to them. And then we're washing our hands, which is our goal of this entirety, and just saying, listen, we gave you the 2.2. It's in you know, some parameter, but not as a graphic that it makes it seem like we're supporting a continuing ongoing grant program. That's
We
my,
talked about possibly a sunset, and that was before you folks came in to this. So Troy and then Mary.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to the vice chair's thoughts at all. If, how do I want to say this? And I agree, I don't want to set up a grant program that is perpetual. If we agree that we're funding these 3Bs. So for me, that point number 5, if we are going to subsidize with state money, private developers, I don't think it's an unrealistic ask to require some permanently affordable housing. I just think that's a good equitable way to spend state money. We know what the housing crisis is. We know what the crisis of the unhoused are in this state. But that's if we're going to continue this sort of language, right? If we're taking James's approach, I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time on this if we're gonna just give $2 million for a grant for whatever they want to use it for this year. Like, that's not a bad way to avoid setting up perpetual grant program out of the capital bill. I don't like it. I don't like how this was landed in our laps. This is $2 million. That's not going to capital costs or capital projects that we've already trimmed. And it's going to private developers for the most part.
Mary?
Well, my concern in the conversation this morning was, it almost sounded like the administration was kind of like, well, it may go forward, it may not go forward. So how invested are they really in this, you know, anything going forward? Was this a one-time that under the radar?
Brian and then Tom?
Yeah, it's sort of an inchoate concern, but if we don't do this grant program, and I'm fine with not doing it, as both the vice chair and now the ranking member have suggested, if we just hand over this $2 million, I mean, I assume the same math is going to happen next time around, right? Is there some prohibition against it, you know? Yeah.
We just don't want to set the precedent of it being bonded dollars and capital. That's a real.
Like go across.
There needs to be a sunset with a relook if it does go.
If we do a program, then the talk was sunset. And if folks started working away from a grant program and just do the 2 million and be silent on any.
But won't we be the vehicle or the vessel again then next time around? I mean, it should not even be coming through here, right?
We don't know what will happen next. year.
Sure.
Say no.
We say no now then.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And as I said, there are people here, I said this to the administration, there are folks on this committee that could zero it out. So you only went from 3 million to 2, could have gone to 0. Connor and then, well.
Yeah, I'll admit my support is pretty thin at this point. I'm mostly still in the game out of solidarity with Barry, who really has suffered some flooding here, and I think that is a good project that I'd like to see happen. But I think I'm kind of coming down with the vice chair, Troy, everybody else here. If we're giving it away, give it away. I mean, like, we're not trying to disqualify those 3 projects by sending that money. If we are, we should spend some more time on this, you know? But like, even adding something like the flood, that feels wrong to me, because that's a talking point. We're adding flood because we want to say we helped flood impacted communities, which might not totally be the case, as Mary's saying here, you know?
Well,
It's
again,
political.
well,
Yeah.
again, I always understand the improvement of our systems to prevent if there's flooding is right, but I don't think in this discussion it was worded correctly in accordance to, well, we were somehow doing something for floods when we didn't even have them.
It rubs me the wrong way a bit, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of using it. excuse.
Right. Well,
Point of clarity, when you said sunset, are you talking about section 25 sunsetting?
That was before you folks came in,
Yes.
we were talking about this grant program. Do you have it go in perpetuity or do you sunset?
Sunset the grant program, so, okay.
So now our conversation's headed in a different direction.
All right.
Sean?
So the grant program was to relieve us of making that decision. Originally, when they said they wanted the 3.1 million, we were like, okay, let's do 2 million and start a grant program. Now the grant program is, right? Is it, are we saying to,
We're hearing committee discussion to figure out where members are, whether or not we do keep a grant program or we don't.
I guess I'm.
That's a committee discussion.
Right.
that's
Correct me
happening.
if I'm wrong, James, but I'm in agreement with James that, if we're gonna give the money for the program as it was presented to us, we don't need a grant program.
Right. And if you set that program up, that, even if it's a sunset, that gives people ideas.
You risk
And
it.
the other thing is that Alex said this morning, which is true, they need the money, which I mean, there's issues there, don't get me wrong, but they need the money this summer. There's no way a grant program's getting set up by June. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of problems with this language. And the bigger one for me, the biggest one is that I don't want this in perpetuity. So if our goal is to clean up, wash our hands of it, then this should be walked away from, in my opinion. But
And the revolving infrastructure fund is being developed.
yes,
Let's let that develop instead of this.
this is a one-timer and then you deal with it.
Yes.
So if that's the case, can this just language be one line? 2 million is appropriate to ACCD for the purpose of, funding
Well.
ready projects or something, whatever, yeah.
We can do that. I just want to see where the whole committee is. Do we let go of the grant program? I want to see a raise of hands.
Yeah, I'd say that.
yeah, it's gonna go.
it's not voting on it.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, I should, right? We
Sorry.
let go of the
Your
grant
town.
program?
It's true.
I guess so, but that makes me want to wash my hands on the whole thing. I mean,
I know.
so sure.
So that's first layers. Never.
And I agree with you. Haven't we all been talking we need affordable housing? So wouldn't it have been helpful if the administration would say, these are the things we are recommending to address the problem of affordable housing? Right now, it seems like we got one little piece and we don't know about the rest of it. And we're all saying we got a problem, but nobody wants to work on it.
Oh, I want to work on
They're
it.
working on it next door.
Okay.
Well, they're working on it all
Yeah,
over
they're
the
working-
place. There's work in
Different
appropriations.
committees.
There's work in general going on, there's work in Senate Economic
Right.
Committee going on. There's lots of moving
It's
pieces on
it's
the
more
house.
about that this isn't the proper vehicle for this
I'm with it.
It's the process.
Right.
Sean,
process.
So then if we do decide to give whatever money away that they're asking for the 3Bs or the 2Bs, how do we protect ourselves as a committee for not doing it again next year?
So the way we're structuring it for this year is we've moved it to cash. The way the administration proposed was bonded dollars,
Mhm.
which automatically is the capital bill. Well, we have made a decision to move it to cash. The next decision we made is that we put that in sub-account B of the cash fund. Sub-account A of the cash fund is for capital projects that we've allocated money to. Sub-account B is for other infrastructure. So we're recommending that the 2 million cash go to sub-account B, other infrastructure. As a line item, what Connor put out was a line item, but it goes to ACCD for whatever, housing projects, whatever. We have also made sure that 2 million goes to that sub-account B from us and not ask appropriations to find $2 million. House appropriation is held harmless by putting this in sub-account B.
Right.
We have found the money, we're transferring it over.
And they're appropriating it.
And they are appropriating, and it's not listed in our capital bill anywhere.
So
It will be listed in the appropriations bill.
So we're just being good team players. We
Yes.
found $2 million and we're gonna give it to somebody else to be responsible.
Yep.
Yes, and we protected the capital bill by not having bonded dollars. It's not even listed on our spreadsheet. It's not listed anywhere.
Which is the best you're gonna do.
Okay, I'm now confused.
But when Alex came in here earlier, he was like,
Who?
Alex Sparrow came in, he said, really appreciate your thoughts, but this is what, to me, it seemed like this is what's gonna happen. Am I wrong in that assumption?
They don't get to decide that.
You don't
What?
get
He's
to-
not on
They
the.
don't decide that.
Okay.
You can't.
All right.
The administration proposes, the legislature is the one.
I mean, they could ask this year, but I mean, I don't want to get into a conversation that doesn't exist at this time.
Okay.
I,
Yeah,
yeah, I likely misunderstood. Do you guys no longer want $2 million to ACCD?
It's pretty much all we.
Okay, so we do have that in the bill.
So we've agreed not to have a grant program,
Okay.
right? Okay, made the bill shorter. Connor then put on the table that it's just a line item. The 2 million is appropriated to the Agency of Commerce and Community Development for local housing projects, local economic development housing projects. Something, right?
Something about being ready, maybe, you know, like,
To address
Keep
the
it simple.
need for affordable housing.
because it'll, I'm anticipating the questions on the floor we get on that, you know, if it's too
I'm hoping I can read
big.
the amended section 25.
Section 20, what'd you say, Joe?
It's gonna be 2 sentences.
Yes, will
Housing,
no longer be in section.
housing development is this one's? What did you say, Joe?
And he was joking
was-
about
Sorry.
reporting on the floor a section that doesn't.
It's good. So there won't be any-
This is true.
Yeah, you should-
It's not gonna exist in the appropriations bill.
Yeah.
The grant program would be?
It's no longer
No
a
grant.
grant program. There's no
So-
grant program. It's a
all-
line item in sub-account B.
Yeah.
$2 million.
Yep, I think we're on the same page. I thought you then were asking me to have that language for the appropriation. Us. Okay.
Something general that says we're giving this money to them and then they do their job.
What we said.
Exactly.
We're not gonna have to report it.
You can have it, but it's for this.
The only way we're gonna have to report it on the floor is people will get the spreadsheet and they're gonna see is for those 3 projects, and they're gonna be zeroed out. And we'll have to explain what we did.
Which will be easy
And
enough.
by this point, the appropriations bill will have already passed.
So it will be this, but without reference to the Housing Development Assistance Grant Program. I heard some suggestions. Do you guys have a?
I would keep it to that personally, but
Well, you can't say grant program.
no, yeah.
You could say for housing, for the development of,
Yeah, but
I'm triggered, I realize that I am the drafter, but in this case, I
You need help.
actually do want you guys.
Why can't it be the Agency of Commerce and Community Development for the purpose of housing development assistance?
You could do that.
It's general. They're gonna deal with the program, you know.
But it's not all housing. Not all of it is housing.
see, that's my concern, just.
Okay,
They're spending it as housing, but it's not all housing.
Need for affordable housing.
Yeah,
for-
Why can't we say that?
I think the administration would object to the affordable part.
Yeah, they objected to the
I
affordable.
don't think that's what they're attempting to do.
Well, Commissioner Farrell said that would tie his hands in at least 2 of these projects.
Permanent affordable housing.
It was the affordable as well.
Was it?
Yeah, there were 2 issues there.
But what defines affordable is his issue.
Barry and Brattleboro are both infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's all
So what-
infrastructure. It's more what he said, there's strict standards in the housing world. And permanent is too restricted.
So just add housing development assistant and housing development and infrastructure assistance.
Yeah, you gotta put the infrastructure in.
My concern is throwing 2 million back at an agency without a real solid direction to be going. I mean, that's great. They can pick projects on that, but I'd like to have some solid numbers in our communities, because every time I ask, what are our actual needs? And that's not a trick question or trying to be, but what is it workforce? Is it affordable housing? Is it for homeless? You know, you want to look at that so you're doing it appropriately across the board. And I'm just, with the monies we're needing for other projects, I'm just hating thought of throwing kind of 2 million at an agency to say, figure it out. But that's just,
Hard to do that with laying out what would be required to release the money through the grant program. And we've come full circle as a committee not to have a
Yeah.
grant program. So,
again, if they're not following a set criteria.
um, I wonder if we could get the word criteria in that under established criteria. Maybe what it could be, and I know this is after the fact, but a report back to appropriations committee and institutions committee on how the dollars were used in terms of infrastructure upgrades or something to that effect.
Yeah, because that was particularly bothersome as regards the Bennington project. The other one you could at least point to, it's gonna help with this pump house or whatever. That one, I was like, oh, throw some money at it, you know?
You're doing your report. If we're washing our hands of it, wouldn't you just want it through the appropriations? Not that we don't want to see it because we're curious, but we don't want really linkage to this.
Yeah, we don't.
We
Well-
want, if we're washing our hands, we gotta wash our hands. I understand Mary's point about having parameters, but they have a plan, whether I agree with it or not, because it's not relevant, right? Well, it is relevant, but if we're giving them the money, they're not gonna use it for something else. They're gonna use it for these three. And normally I would not feel this way, but the only way they're gonna get that money out the door is if we're quick with it.
So if you look at the page 31, we did have a report back. And basically, I wonder if we could have a report back that would talk about what project criteria was used in the application process that was developed for expending these dollars.
But it's post-spend.
It's post, I know, it's post-spend. I said that, but at
Okay.
least a report
Yeah.
back that would indicate what the criteria was used to determine which project.
Yeah.
And what the application process that was developed for this. So at least there's some structure there that we're saying, hey, you got to report back to us that you have some structure to
Yep.
this 2 million.
So that makes sense to me, just taking James's point. If you're trying to separate yourself from this thing,
You don't
you can
have,
also accomplish that reporting back by just asking them to come and talk about the projects that were done rather
you
than
can send
mandating
report
it.
to the General Assembly.
Yeah, you could do that. You could do that.
Just report to the General Assembly. And then if general military is, or whatever they're called, general housing is interested, or Probst is interested, or economic development, or us, going to the General Assembly. Of course, we're not
Right.
going to remember there's a report back, but that's the way you do it, it's a report back to the General Assembly.
Yeah.
So the Secretary of ACCD to report to the General Assembly on the projects funded through da, 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 da.
And what project criteria was used and what the process for the application was, or something to that effect. Just pick up a little bit of line 7 and 8 there.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Does that work? I know it's after the fact,
Yeah, I think it does.
but there's something there.
Provides a political check is what I would say.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think like what bothers me is the act of doing this will set a green light for coming in future years with similar projects. And I don't know if we can really get ahead of that before Friday when we vote this out, but I'd like to brainstorm at some point. It'd be statutory letter to the administration saying the bank's closed, for future years here. What good that does, but I think we have to send a message. Otherwise, we're right back where we were next time.
You can do a memo that says that the feeling or whatever this committee is such and such.
I think even like a memo or something like that, when you introduce the capital bill next year, we are expecting not to see any types of
That's
these
what I'm saying.
projects.
I
Yeah,
agree
yeah,
with you.
yep, I think same page.
Can I ask a language question, something trivial, just the line item for the $2 million appropriation. The last that I had heard was to ACCD for the purpose of housing development and infrastructure assistance. That makes sense to me. I think people may ask what infrastructure assistance is. Like it sounds like a distinct category from housing development. You could also say to ACCD for the purpose of developing housing and infrastructure for housing, like something like that, if that's the
whichever way.
Okay,
Whatever you,
Whatever works.
I like the second one better.
okay.
I think that
and it's going, you caught that it's going to subcom B.
Yes, I think that's the way that it is.
Yes.
And we're shying away from the political term affordable housing. Why? Didn't we all run on the concept that we need affordable housing? And instead of saying zero, we're giving $2 million. So why wouldn't we use the term that we are willing to support?
What is the wording that we're using now for the line item?
The line item would be to ACCD for the development of housing and infrastructure for housing.
So would people be opposed to putting affordable housing?
I had no objection when I brought it up, Kevin. It was because I thought I understood that that was one of the, that was a two-part
That's the tenant.
part of the commissioner.
That was the tenant. of
Right,
it.
well, were they saying that like adding affordable would disqualify maybe some of these three
That's what
projects?
I thought I understood.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Various.
It was permanent affordability.
Yeah, he
It was
didn't
both
know.
ends.
Okay.
It was
He didn't
both.
want the
It
word
was
permanent.
both, but they're spinning it. They're saying it's about affordable housing.
Well, the various program is just the infrastructure.
Well, that's the problem.
It's the infrastructure for
It's going to
this,
a subdivision.
it's going to a subdivision for affordable housing.
I don't know if it's affordable.
Well,
That's
in fact, he.
Well, they-
They guaranteed was
The only
Bennington.
one that would be checking that mark is Bennington.
Yes, yeah.
He specifically said that's the only one of the three.
Yeah.
Right,
and
that's
it's
right. He
permanent
did,
housing.
because Winston Prouty does not want to have VHCB money because it would require them to put aside some units for permanent affordability.
Yep.
And then the Berry one, I believe they talked a little bit about affordable.
Yeah, well, they're working with Downstreet, so.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, so they were talking about some affordable units.
Yeah.
And that's
I
where,
would put affordable
That's
housing.
the word permanent.
Yeah.
happy to.
Okay, I got it.
What's the worst gonna
It's
happen?
gonna change once it gets over to this.
You're right there.
This is gonna be,
Do you want the constraint for both? So the way it's set up is development of affordable housing and infrastructure for housing. Do you want infrastructure for affordable housing? Because in the latter category.
infrastructure for those projects.
Okay,
Because that's what, it's infrastructure for those
Okay.
projects.
and okay, so development of affordable housing and related infrastructure.
Yes.
bingo.
Glad you're in the seat.
Yeah, we're,
This is how it works. You can do it.
This is how we do.
I'm just gonna say that affordable's tough because once you throw that word in there, it can make it really hard. We just went through this in Shelburne, you know, because there's gotta really, you really gotta get into the weeds with it because affordable means it's gotta hit certain criteria
Yes.
for people's, you know, so just know that that is, you know, it doesn't, it seems like not all these projects are just affordable. It seems like there's a mix of them,
Mhm.
which is what they were saying
Yeah.
was part of it, right? So I thought the affordable in this was making it more complicated, but
No,
I
you're
just
right.
needed to say that.
You're right.
Because we're,
John, is affordable housing defined in statute? I think
So there are different kinds of affordable housing. The one I'm familiar with is in Title 24. There's a specific definition that is for owner occupied. No more than 30% of a household at 120% AMI. And then for renter, it's no more than spending no more than 30%. So that's the typical figure we think about when we think about affordable housing of a household at 80% of AMI.
Which I don't disagree with. Just saying that if you say that across the board, it means all these projects have to be that, and I think that gets tricky.
And I'm saying it because, and I'm joking with you, Mr. Sweeney, I'm not looking to augment your profit.
Right.
You go out and speculate on a piece of land and
Right.
build a bunch of apartments.
Right.
The purpose is to help people that we've heard in the chamber saying, I'm not gonna have a place to live.
Right.
That's what we're trying to do, are we not?
I love that. I mean, I'm sure. Yeah.
That's what I think, broadly speaking, that's what we're trying to do as a legislature. I don't think we do that in this bill.
Right.
Right, and that's why that's why we're passing it off. We're
Right.
helping the governor do what he's trying to do and us when we said we want to work for affordable housing.
If Phil, well, excuse me, governor, his thing is housing, period. Including affordable. And, you know, I agree with Sean because, well, I don't agree with Sean because he's here, but I agree because Alex said this morning. the different definitions of affordable can hinder their ability to make these things happen. And even though I have some issues with these things, you know, like we're passing it off, which I'm happy to do, but I also don't want to put even greater handcuffs on them. And I want it to be as simple as possible and get it out of our hands and and the Senate could change something, as Alice has said
Well, they
multiple
will.
times. I don't want to harp on it. And
I might offer to just, on the point that not all of the projects could go through if you included an affordability criterion. You've already reduced the funding to 2 from the
so
3.1, so some project is not happening among the.
Where they'll get a third of
Right,
2
so-
million. So Gina?
I'm pretty comfortable with the idea of not putting the affordable piece in there just because Down Street says seat at the table on this one. And that's gonna, that's gonna put some affordable units in some way, shape or form in there, and then nobody's hands are tied.
And Alex mentioned that this morning, where there's in all the projects, there's entities involved where they're going to take care of that later. And I hate abdicating our responsibilities, but again, if we're kicking the football down the road, why are we spending that much time on it? Yeah.
So are we back at taking affordable out?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So for
Going around in circles.
developing housing and related infrastructure.
Thank you.
Yes.
We done?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Final answer.
Okay, now,
Do we need to vote?
no. we gotta do that. No.
It just shows that. it's-
Now we have one more thing.
Clerk's getting bored.
Just getting bored.
Can you give me that?
Well, your attention deficit. You need to keep moving.
Well, I'll be doing it now, so. Just throw it away.
Yeah, we did that. We did now. The language.
Thank you. What's your work? You
The
figured.
language for.
Uh-oh.
So where are we? Now we are with language for what happens over the summer and fall.
Yes.
The Capitol complex where we may hear word from FEMA and the legislature will need to act. So the structure that we have put in place in the past is set up a special committee with joint fiscal committee with the 2 chairs of the institutions committees.
Mhm.
So I asked John to go back to how we've done this in the past. We've done it a couple of times, particularly with the Waterbury complex, and we did it one other time with something else, and I don't remember what it was. It was joint legislative management committee we did on one thing. So John, walk us through this. It's not in the draft.
Okay.
So capital complex flood recovery, we're talking about, this is last year's capital bill. So special committee on the capital complex flood recovery is established, comprises joint fiscal committee, so that's your money chairs and chairs of the House Committee on Corrections and Institutions and the Senate Committee on Institutions. So that's your composition of the special committee. Meets at the call of the chair of the joint fiscal committee, which I don't actually know off the top of my head. I'm guessing Ways and Means, but I'm not sure.
I don't, is it? Is it?
That was my guess, but
Sarah Cummings.
um,
Last time
I think it is Kornheiser, and I think that
It was
comes as
Senator-
vice chair.
Yeah, and it was Senator Kitchell last year. It flips, I think, right?
So meets at their call in consultation with the chairs of the institutions committees. So basically, you guys would have a voice in if that is called. Meets to review and recommend alterations to proposals and plans for capital complex flood recovery. So this is meant to account for, I think this is hopefully obvious, but you're not in legislative session, so how can you deal with urgent situations?
Mhm.
Meets to review and recommend alterations to proposals and plans for that capital complex flood recovery, and may, as necessary, grant approval to proposals and plans for that flood recovery. Commissioner of BGS to provide quarterly updates to the special committee on the planning process, and to be entitled to per diem and expenses provided. What I would say is this exists now. This is in existence now, so.
Yeah, it's in last year's capital bill, so I don't know how many people remember it. That's the thing. And Connor, you had a little addition you wanted to add.
All I wanted was a line just saying that, BGS would consult or work or update the city of Montpelier Flood Commission, just because it so drastically could change the landscape of our city. And I just want to avoid like sort of the Wadbury situation where it's like, we weren't really talking in that case. But
So the request would be to have the special committee, upon making making decisions, updating the Montpelier Flood Commission as to their decision-making base.
Special committee or?
Or BGS.
Or the administration.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay with the
I
administration
think
doing
it's the
it?
administration.
So Commissioner PGS too. Okay.
So my gut is telling me that we should and I know what you're saying, it's in last year's capital bill, but people aren't gonna think to look to
Well, especially
last
with
year's
change.
capital bill. I would put this in this year's capital bill, just to keep it in the forefront, because
I agree.
definitely this year we're gonna have something.
Doesn't hurt to repeat it.
So I can do that. I'll need to just repeal last year, so you don't have a duplicative committee.
Looks pretty good though.
And then put in language somehow. It wouldn't necessarily be the special committee.
The commissioner, you're saying the commissioner of PGS would.
It would be the administration. It's gotta be somebody. Because it depends with FEMA. This is all connected to what we get back from FEMA. And FEMA is working with the administration and with BGS. It's really Doug Farnham. It's more, BGS is working, but they're not in the driver's seat per se, negotiating with FEMA.
Who's the Secretary of Administration?
I'm working to
FEMA-
Connor for.
FEMA's in that group, right?
Yeah.
Isn't Barnum working the AOA?
No, I'm not sure. Is it,
I thought he was.
it's a special,
He's a special position.
it's a special position. for
Yeah.
that. But it would be the administration, so you can work your magic.
Do math.
In the absence of other things, they're probably saying the commissioner of BGS, just because that's commissioners involved in the
No,
process.
that's okay, yeah, just. It could get pretty, like, I don't know if people saw the executive order 2 days ago there.
Which part?
As far as preparedness, and I don't know if this will affect reimbursements, but anything's on the table. States and municipalities are on their own. FEMA's done with doing emergency preparedness, so.
Yeah, on the
yeah.
federal,
Yeah.
on the federal.
Take a deep breath. You never know what's gonna happen.
Ooh,
Executive order is not a law, but
Oh, I think they've abdicated looking at laws. That's what it feels like. Can you imagine if that governor, regardless, whoever the governor was there was doing all these executive orders? I think the legislature would start to kick in. Regardless.
Well, we'll stick to the Capitol bill because
And
that's
it
what we
looks like,
I'm not commenting on this yet.
did you resolve on page 27, you had it in green.
Yes.
Did we resolve this?
You're talking about the chart language?
Comprehensive cost and financing assessment?
I did. I can show you what I have if you want to see it now, but I can show you.
Is there anything else dangling?
We resolved the cash encumbrance question, which I think was one of the lingering things here. So we talked about that end of plus 3 years.
Oh,
And
Gene's
then
got a
you-
hand up.
So you deal with the freeze, the money freeze that Nick Kramer was talking about this morning?
Yes.
Yes, that's actually exactly this. Yep. So for that section, it's a 2-year freeze. We're adding end of to make clear when the deadline is, and then changing from 2 to 3 years, so there's more time to work out.
So before we leave, before John leaves, we had a little group that worked on drinking and wastewater revolving loan fund and municipal pollution plans. What did you do? You folks have done a lot of work.
Well, it's complicated, but it's complicated at the same time. So, because some of the answers we don't have, to be honest with you. The 14.5,
Which has been
Yeah.
freed up for FY 26.
yep, the IIJA, so there, the projects are not yet ranked. Fiscal year 26, there's $7.4 million of that going to fiscal year 26. 5 million is going to drinking water. 2.4 goes to clean water. In fiscal year 27, there's $7.1 million. And 4.8 of that goes to drinking water and 2.3 goes to clean. So for applications, the clean water right now has 125 applications and drinking water has 83.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, the project's in our rank, so that's the kind of like setting on the burner over there. The one that's harder for us is the 9.8 million IIJA for fiscal year 23 and 24. So in fiscal year 23, there was federal government had a 10% match. The year before
Right.
that they did as
Right.
well.
And it goes
So
up.
Yeah, so they had $3.1 million. So 2.1 of that goes to drinking water and went to, and 1 million went to clean water. And so in 24, it's a 20% match. So they had $6.8 million, 4.6 went to drinking water, 2.2 went to clean. So what he told us was that they're all deposited for projects that hit benchmarks and they had to save the money for the projects in the pipeline. We asked about a list of things, and he said he didn't have a list readily available, which is where it's complicated because I'm sure that they have got this money out the
We
door.
always struggle with getting a list.
But that's what we got for an answer. So those are the two IIJAs.
But that used up all of the 9 point.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I used it.
But you have no lists at all of any projects?
I have a list for a different thing that we're gonna get into, but I don't have a list for this.
For the drinking water and the
Clean
waste-
water.
Clean water revolving loan fund for the IIJA money,
Yeah, the IIJA.
not our money.
So, and then we had a different task, which is there is for fiscal year 24, we had $4 million in cash and $4 million in bond to go to pollution control grants.
Municipal pollution.
Yeah,
control.
municipal control. So the cash is easy. The cash is easy because it's listed right out and it equals $4 million. And that was Burlington, Ludlow, Heinsberg, Hartford, and Colchester. The first three of those are done. And Hartford and Colchester, Hartford has 200K left to be dispersed that and on their chart says between July and December is when they expect it to go out. And Hartford has 62K, which is supposed to go out before June 30th. And their timeline is what they expect. They also expect of all that money that there should be, they have a contract that's closing, and then they might have $70,000 left on that, which in the team scheme of 8 million is nothing, but they may have 70,000 left where the contract came in a little, they're not closed precisely yet. The harder part, which I did ask about, what we all asked about, is the $4 million in bonds. Now, we do have a sheet, and I shared it with our Karen and stuff. So it has the list of all the other stuff that's the bonds, but it only comes up to $3.7 million.
That's for your municipal pollution grants.
Yeah, so that's
Right?
different.
Yes.
No,
Yeah,
that's
that's
what you're
right.
wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So I asked Eric where the other 226 million or 226,000, why it wasn't there, and he said he wasn't sure. And so that's our question on that part is where that 2.6 does the total instead of equaling 8 million equals 7,774,390. So, where's that 220, whatever? So that's that. And then, where do we go? So also pollution control, we were asked about, the fiscal year 25, which is $3.3 million. And that's easy because Burlington and Swanton got that money, are getting that money. They will need more for these. They're not going to be complete, but Burlington got 2.3 million of that and Swanton is getting 1 million of that. So that one was nice and clean and we like them. And then the other thing was the revolving fund, state revolving.
Clean water or
Yeah.
drink water.
Oh,
That's your
both.
base.
yeah, we're
both.
breaking it down.
Both. So the revolving fund, base revolving fund. So they had $2 million left.
And that's their drinking and wastewater?
Yep. So drinking water had 1.2 million
Okay.
and clean has 800,000, and this is left for 2026. But they spent for drinking water 2.2 million in 25 and 1.6 in 25 for clean water. Okay, so that totals out to some $3.8 million that they spent last year. So the issue wasn't really an issue, but in fiscal year 24, the grants were less than anticipated because of the earmarks issue at the federal government level.
Yeah, so they had money
And
left over.
they had money left over.
Right, that's why there's no money in FY 26.
Right, and so this year they're gonna need more money because the grant, because of how they changed the earmarks and stuff in the federal government, there's gonna be more federal grants available. So
This year.
this year,
This year.
and so they're gonna need more money At some point.
What the Clean Water Board recommended was nothing for the Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund and the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund.
And what Eric said when we asked him is you didn't ask for that money. He said, we can get away with
Yes, you can.
applying, and if we need it, we can get it BA or next year's budget. That we just need to get, because they weren't anticipating that this was gonna happen.
When did they find that out?
Like,
Not very long. ago.
no, like in the last
Yeah,
week.
I was in the room for that.
Yeah, it was-
February, March, April.
Yeah, it was pretty quick,
Yeah.
pretty.
So that's federal. And is it earmarked that it's going out at a particular time from the feds, or is it based on your federal fiscal year cycle?
Federal
Federal fiscal
fiscal year.
year.
You got time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got 18 months.
Yeah.
Right?
He's- yeah.
Because what happens there, you don't have to apply right off the front. And it is based on their fiscal year, and that's October to September.
Yeah.
And you have 3 different times during that fiscal year that you can apply, but it's available for 18 months, if I remember correctly, because we lived through this.
Yeah, and he didn't seem
He
concerned
didn't
about
seem
that.
concerned.
Not at all.
Okay.
But I mean,
Okay.
there's the.
Because it depends when you apply, because the feds, the Fed time and our time for applying for that match doesn't track. And the feds, there's a time frame of about 1.5 years that you can apply your state match to that. But it's connected with their fiscal year, and our fiscal year starts in July. So, you add some time even to our own fiscal year where you can match the federal.
Yeah.
So it helps with that. So he didn't need anything in drinking water or clean water for FY 26.
No,
And FY 27 for drinking water, there's 590,000 for drinking water in FY 27. In the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund, we don't know what that is yet, because that will be determined next year through the Clean Water Fund Board that makes a recommendation for the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. So there's nothing there for FY 27 because we're not there yet, because the Clean Water Fund Board will make that determination come the fall, this fall. So that's where we'll take into
Yeah.
account the Clean Water
And-
Revolving Loan Fund.
And we wanted to ask you, like, I know it doesn't have to be online, I suppose, but so the whole issue of that, the $226,000, I mean,
That's in which one, the Clean Water Revolving Loan
yeah,
Fund?
the
Municipal pollution?
yeah. So how it's only 7 and it's supposed to be 8, so that's,
So in the municipal pollution grants, between FY 24 and FY 25, they had 11.3 million. Okay? And bonded in cash.
Mhm.
Plus they had the 9.8 million for IIJA. Most of the 9.8 million is out the door.
Yep.
Of that 11.3 million for municipal pollution grants, up to this point, how much of that has been expended?
So we have the sheet here where we have, let's see. So we add the 4 million. Some totals. It's you got 2 million. I would say less than about half, because you got so we got 1.9.
That's out of 4
The
million.
total. Yeah, the 4 million total. And then
But
we have
which
that.
4 million?
This is the cash. So out of
That's
the
the
cash,
cash.
we have a whole bunch of money that hasn't been expended yet.
Alice, are we done with John for language, or is he's needed?
I think so. I just,
I need to
yeah.
talk with Troy as the only kind of.
Yeah, why don't
should I-
you and Troy?
you can
do that?
Email.
I'll
And if
type
we
it up
need
on
to
It's
talk-
almost 1 million. That hasn't
Yeah.
even
Okay.
It's the whole thing. Because
So
you
you
got
have the figures.
Yeah, I do.
And you have 1.4.
In a longer page of notes, that's what's what's not.
Okay,
Every
so,
4 million.
so
Your computer.
before we break real quick, did you feel that there was some flexibility in the municipal pollution grants for the 4 million
We
FY
need to
26?
relate what we let them.
That's what's before us.
I didn't think
And
so.
I'm not meaning to be a stickler.
no, but it'd be nice. to have-
John can go.
Total sum.
John, you're ready
If
to.
he's just talking short.
You and Troy figure it out.
So like the other ones are smaller.
Time now.
So there's a lot of money, folks, moving around And
Weird.
what I'm picking up, the municipal pollution grants.
Mhm.
Okay, it's 11.3 million that they have to date. Is any of the 14.5 that's going to be released? Is any of that the municipal pollution grants? Or is that all
That's
gonna go?
Drinking water and clean water.
So there's no municipal.
No.
And so the issue, like with all this, he said this is all encumbered.
It's deposited.
It's deposited, et cetera. And all these projects are going forward. And they're all ready.
Yeah, so you would like.
It's just a matter of when the money's going out the door to fill it. But like, there was no inclination. We've asked multiple times that, is this too much? Do you have money left over? And he's like, no, they're gonna use all of that. And if anything, you need more.
But did he give you a list of even simply listing the project?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you get into the 4 million that is being requested in FY
No,
twenty-six?
but it's good.
4 million being requested in FY twenty-six. Get into that.
Second. No, you had told us to ask about the back money. So we were-
Right, but
we were
that kind of plays into what do we do with our current 4 million being requested in capital? So we don't know how much is left to date for the municipal pollution grants, and then what that 4 million in FY twenty-six is gonna be used for. Because that's what you need to know the background, previous money, because there's a lot of money in the municipal pollution grants. So we need to know where we are there to determine, do we do 4 million in the pollution grants in FY twenty-six?
That part they have in spoke here. That's part. Cause if he goes, gave me your chart. Very
So
nice guy.
maybe the thing to do instead of taking up committee time on all of this is maybe three of you could kind of follow up maybe with Eric to find out how much of the,
4 million.
yeah, there's 4 million in FY twenty-six. In our spreadsheet, there's 4 million.
Yeah, it's here.
They did.
And
Only Cecilia.
By 98.
let's see if we need it. So maybe you three could do some work on that.
Yeah.
And, instead of taking committee time on this and
Yes,
figure out how much of that 11.3 million that they already have from FY 24 and 25 is going to be left, and how much of the 4 million they're going to use in FY 26. Okay? So it's Thursday. Let's, Eric is pretty responsible, Eric Blatt, so maybe you could kind of find this out by tomorrow morning, because we really want to, oh, and did John leave?
Yes.
He may be talking to Scott in the hallway. They said something about language.
Can you go out and see if he's there? I want to see what his schedule is to get the draft tomorrow. Is he still there?
You said he was able to go, so.
No, but I want to find, we gotta get the bill out tomorrow, so I need to know when he can have the draft for the language. Because we gotta go through them
I thought I heard him say he'd work on it tonight.
So I'm wondering if we can meet at 8:30 tomorrow and do something,
us to meet 8:30?
do something.
Okay.
And, because tomorrow we gotta look at the spreadsheet, confirm that, and the language is gonna take time, folks, and we're gonna be on the floor for quite a while, I think, tomorrow morning. So we're gonna be working tomorrow afternoon, so be prepared. I know we tried not to have work late on Friday, but some of this is out of our hands if we don't, work late tonight, have John do another draft.
Are you expecting later that we should cancel Friday obligations in the evening?
I
That's
would,
relevant.
I pushed everything till
Push everything.
is he there?
Oh,
He is, he's booked tomorrow 9 to 10. He's already booked with us from 1 to 3. I think so. Senate Finance is probably going to grab him.
Can you come in at 8:30?
Wait a minute.
Are we trying to get him before?
That's much fun.
Yeah.
He is, when is he free?
He is busy from 9 to 9:45 or 10.
For how
That's
long?
from 9 until 9:45 or 10. He's with,
So he's busy till after 10.
until 10.
And we're on the floor.
He's doing the yield bill, starting at 9.
He thinks he'll be done by noon for that?
he thinks that's only gonna take him a half hour, then there's a meeting from 9:30 until 9:45 or 10.
So I'd like to meet at 8:30. Is Scott still out there?
They're in the copy room.
I'd like to meet at 8:30. Can you bring Scott or John in?
I'll bring them both back.
Oh, we need them.
Almost anyway.
And we're on the floor tomorrow at 10.
9:30.
9:30, thank you.
You guys are so scattered.
Well, Betsy hasn't sent the ask yet.
It's always, it's the schedule every week.
Right. So we're trying to figure out our schedule tomorrow.
Sorry, I was.
So when can you have the new draft? And we need Scott too.
He's right there. Yeah.
John, when can you have the new draft done?
I mean, it'll be ready for tomorrow morning.
8:30?
Ready whenever you want.
8:30.
I mean, it could be ready in 10 minutes, but,
We could stay and work tonight.
please.
I'll be another hour or two in the spreadsheet.
Okay, so let's do
Three or
draft
four.
tomorrow morning at 9:30 and you have to,
8:30.
at 9,
8:30.
8:30, you have to be gone what time?
I need to be in Ways and Means at 9 for Yokeville.
It's not gonna amount to a row of pins for half an hour on the draft. What about the spreadsheet?
John and I were just finalizing the last couple of things. I could have the spreadsheet done, honestly, like 15-20 minutes if you.
So why don't we do the folks wanna do the spreadsheet tonight or tomorrow morning at 8:30?
Sure,
Works
let's
for you.
do tonight.
Tonight,
Tonight, please.
I'd rather do it at 8:30.
Yeah, I don't want to do it tonight.
If you don't do it,
What do you-
you have a long day tomorrow.
Tomorrow's normally a short day anyway.
Yeah, but I've got to be.
We're gonna be on the floor for a while tomorrow. I can go either way. What do people wanna do?
Can we come off the floor tomorrow for some of that debate?
That's what it is. We're gonna have the big debate. They postponed the
Everything
no.
to
They postponed the data privacy till tomorrow,
James, I'm emailing Eric.
and then we got budget adjustment.
Oh, you are?
tomorrow.
Yeah, I got it. I got one crafted. The 11.3 was
Suck out for,
leftover
yeah.
money from
We're
what?
not gonna be able to duck out.
Let's do the spreadsheet tonight.
We do the spreadsheet tonight.
Yes, ma'am.
I can.
Okay.
With the pleasure of the chair.
Let's,
If you give me 10 minutes,
yep,
I mostly have it done. I just need to print it. and
I
double
love
check
you.
places.
We're having a love fest.
so John, you are available with the draft whenever we get off the floor tomorrow, basically, because you're not available. I mean, 8:30 to 9 is,
It's on Friday, it's about 3 months.
that's not gonna give us enough time.
It's a 7.7.
And
The
to,
committees are all done for the night, which means their snacks are undefended.
Interesting.
You're undefended.
you could drop off the drafts in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, I can just send to Phil, whatever. I'm gonna send to Scott because he needs to see.
Yeah, and then we can get the copies. I'm leery of having the committee read it on their own because we have so many new members.
I
I'm
mean,
really leery about that, but
tracks the request. We just.
yeah, but we've got to look at the whole bill and we've got to read the whole bill line by line. And we are going to be making changes for another draft, I can assure you. There'll be something that we
I'm
make.
running to look at this right now.
Thank you.
I'm just, I'm pretty sure there'll probably be some changes for another draft. Usually, that's what happens. It'd be great if it doesn't, but usually it's gonna happen. Something will pop up. And you're only available from 1 to 3.
No, that's just when I'm booked.
So Sam's.
I'm potentially with you guys. The only thing I was mentioning is that based on the reaction I got today in finance to the tip proposal, would not be surprised if they won't come off my time, but they haven't booked me. I just gathered from.
Oh, I wasn't kidding, right?
They were.
You do have.
They're trying to get the bill out tomorrow.
Yes, they have to get it up.
Everybody's trying to get their.
I checked that commerce, but I didn't look that into signal.
What?
Money would come in every day.
So do the draft, get it ready. We'll be in, if you can get the draft ready by 8:30
Yeah.
tomorrow,
Be ready.
maybe I can help walk the committee through some of it for a little bit.
And the change will be highlighted. They'll be clear where the.
Yep. And then we'll work in the afternoon. I think we're gonna be on the floor for a while tomorrow morning. if that data privacy bill comes out with an amendment. That's gonna be, well, or that could go real fast.
Just get picked one day. I thought it got kicked till Tuesday.
I think it was the Friday.
I'm gonna run unless you
Yeah,
guys.
we're done. You two for